Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Learn English podcast. I'm Clara.
And I'm Mark. Today, we're diving into one of the most famous events in world history, the story of the Titanic.
Yes, the Titanic is not just a movie. It was a real ship that sank more than 100 years ago. And it's a great topic to practice English while learning history.
Exactly. We'll tell the story, explain some useful English phrases, and talk about what we can learn from it.
So grab your headphones, get comfortable, and let's start our journey across the ocean of history. So, Mark, let's start from the very beginning. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a dream.
Yes, that's right. The Titanic was built in Belfast, Northern Ireland by a company called Harland and Wolff. Construction began in 1909, and it took about 2 years to finish.
People called it the Ship of Dreams. It was the largest and most luxurious ocean liner ever built at that time.
Exactly. It was 269 meters long, had 9 decks, and could carry more than 2,200 passengers. That's huge. Imagine a small city floating on the water.
Wow, that's amazing! And people also said it was unsinkable, right?
Yes, the designers believed the Titanic could never sink because it had special compartments inside the hull. They thought even if one part was damaged, the ship would stay afloat.
But as we'll learn later, nature doesn't always follow human plans.
That's true. Anyway, inside the Titanic, everything was top class. The first class section looked like a palace. It had restaurants, smoking rooms, a gym, a swimming pool, and even an elevator.
Can you believe that? An elevator in 1912. That was very modern for the time.
Totally. And the decoration was beautiful. Gold details, wood carvings, and expensive furniture.
Meanwhile, second class and third class passengers had more simple rooms, but even those were better than most ships in that period.
Many of the third-class passengers were immigrants traveling from Europe to America. They were looking for a new life, new opportunities, maybe a job or a better future.
It's really inspiring. It shows how the Titanic represented hope for many people, but also pride and luxury for the rich.
Yes, it was a mix of everything: dreams, money, technology, and human ambition.
By the way, Mark, do you know the Titanic's first and only voyage started from Southampton, England?
Yes, it departed on April 10, 1912, and stopped at Cherbourg, France and Queenstown, now called Cove, in Ireland, before heading toward New York City.
So it was a long journey across the Atlantic Ocean, from Europe to America, about 4,000 kilometers.
Right. Everyone was so excited. Newspapers called it the safest ship in the world.
It's interesting because that phrase, the safest ship in the world, became so ironic later.
Yes, ironic means something that turns out the opposite of what you expect, like calling it unsinkable, and then it sinks.
Exactly. And that's what makes the Titanic story so powerful. It's full of human confidence, but also human mistakes.
I think it's a good reminder that technology alone doesn't make us invincible.
Well said. All right, let's continue. The Titanic began its journey full of hope and excitement. But just 4 days later, something terrible happened.
Yes, it was the night of April 14, 1912. The ship was crossing the icy waters of the North Atlantic. The weather was calm, and the sea looked peaceful, almost too peaceful.
That's right. The passengers were sleeping, dancing, or relaxing. No one expected danger.
But the crew had already received several warnings from other ships about icebergs nearby.
Unfortunately, those warnings were not fully taken seriously. The Titanic was moving at almost full speed, about 22 knots, which is more than 40 kilometers per hour.
Exactly. Around 11:40 p.m., one of the lookouts, a man named Frederick Fleet, saw a large dark shape in front of the ship and shouted, "Iceberg, right ahead."
That moment changed everything. The officers tried to turn the ship to avoid the iceberg, but it was too late.
The iceberg scraped along the right side of the Titanic, damaging several of its compartments below the waterline.
At first, people didn't realize how serious it was. Some passengers even continued their activities, thinking it was just a small bump.
Yes, some people described it as a gentle vibration, like the ship was gliding over something.
But soon, the truth became clear. The ship began taking in water quickly.
The lower decks started to flood, and the front of the ship, called the bow, began to sink slowly.
And here's something very sad. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The Titanic could carry over 2,200 people, but it only had lifeboats for about half that number.
And because people believed the ship was unsinkable, many lifeboats were launched half-empty at first.
Some passengers refused to leave. They said, "Why get into a small boat when this big ship is much safer?"
Yes, they trusted the Titanic too much. And when they finally realized it was sinking, panic started to spread.
The crew began following the women and children first rule. But the situation was chaotic, dark, cold, and confusing.
The night sky was full of stars, but the ocean was like black glass. The temperature was around -2 degrees Celsius, freezing cold.
Can you imagine? People standing on the deck, hearing the band still playing music to keep everyone calm, while the ship was slowly going down into the dark ocean.
It's really heartbreaking. The musicians were incredibly brave. They played until the very end.
Yes, that's one of the most famous stories. They played Nearer My God to Thee, a hymn about hope and faith, even in the face of death.
Clara, there's something about this story that always gives me chills.
You mean that feeling of fear or sadness when you imagine being there?
Yes? Imagine hearing the ship's captain, Edward Smith, giving his final orders, telling people to save as many as possible, and then disappearing into the sea.
It's like a movie scene, but it was real life. Real people, real fear.
Right. And most people didn't have time to say goodbye.
But there were also acts of kindness. Some men gave up their places in lifeboats so that women and children could survive.
That's true. Even in a tragedy, humanity shines through.
Beautifully said, Mark. Okay, before we move to next part, let's summarize what happened that night.
Sure? The Titanic hit an iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, 1912. The ship began to flood. There weren't enough lifeboats, and confusion turned into panic.
Exactly. And within a few short hours, the greatest ship in the world began to disappear beneath the waves. In the last part, we talked about the moment when the Titanic hit the iceberg. Now we're moving into the most heartbreaking part of the story, the sinking itself.
Yes. After the iceberg struck, the ship began to fill with water quickly. The bow, or the front of the ship, went down first, while the back of the ship, called the stern, lifted higher and higher into the air.
It was a terrible sight. People were screaming, lights were flickering, and the freezing ocean was waiting below.
Around 2:20 a.m., just a little over 2 hours after the collision, The Titanic completely broke apart and disappeared under the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean.
The sea was silent again, but filled with people struggling in the icy water. Many didn't survive because the temperature was below freezing.
That's right. Even if you fell into the water, you could only live for about 15 minutes before freezing to death.
So tragic. And out of about 2,200 passengers and crew, more than 1,500 lost their lives that night. Only around 700 people were rescued.
The rescue came from a ship called RMS Carpathia. When they received the Titanic's distress signal, they immediately turned around and rushed to help.
They arrived about 2 hours after the Titanic sank. Imagine, they could still see people floating on the water, some calling for help, others already gone.
The survivors on the lifeboats watched in shock. They saw the giant ship disappear beneath the waves. Some of them couldn't even believe it was real.
Yes, there are many survivor stories describing that moment. The sound of people's voices fading, the darkness, the cold, and the feeling of complete helplessness.
One survivor, Eva Hart, was only 7 years old. She said, "I can never forget the cries of the people who were left behind."
That gives me goosebumps. It reminds us that behind the numbers, there were real human lives. Families, friends, children.
Exactly. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a collection of stories, of courage, love, and loss.
And speaking of courage, the ship's band kept playing music until the very end. The captain, Edward Smith, stayed on board. Many crew members helped others instead of saving themselves.
They showed true bravery. There's an English phrase, going down with the ship, which means taking responsibility and facing the end bravely, just like Captain Smith did.
That's a powerful phrase. It's often used today when someone accepts the result of their actions, even when things go wrong.
Clara, I always find this story deeply emotional. It's not just about a ship sinking, it's about human behavior in extreme situations.
I agree. You can see both sides of humanity, fear and panic, but also bravery and compassion.
Exactly. Some people thought only of themselves, but many others helped strangers.
That's why the Titanic story is still remembered today, not only for its tragedy, but for the lessons it gave to the world.
After the disaster, many new safety rules were made for all ships.
Yes, for example, every ship must now have enough lifeboats for all passengers, regular emergency drills, and 24-hour radio communication.
So even though it was a terrible tragedy, something good came out of it. Safer travel for everyone.
Exactly. The world learned from this disaster, and those lessons continue to save lives today.
And in that way, the Titanic will never truly be forgotten.
Beautifully said, Mark.
So, Clara, what lessons can we learn from the Titanic?
For me, it's about humility. The builders believed the ship was too strong to sink, but nature proved them wrong.
Good point. It reminds us that no matter how advanced we are, we should stay humble.
And also, we learn the importance of preparation and safety. Never underestimate risk.
Exactly. In English, there's a phrase, better safe than sorry. It means it's better to be careful than to regret it later.
Nice phrase. Everyone can use it in daily life, not just when talking about ships.
That was a powerful story, and I hope our listeners learned something new, both in English and in history.
Yes, the Titanic teaches us about human strength and weakness at the same time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And tell us in the comments, what lesson do you learn from the Titanic story?
Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.
Bye, and keep learning English every day.